As a correctional officer, I watched an inmate's wife tremble while she met with another officer. Her fear was like a live wire in the dead air of the visitation room. You could almost taste it. In that moment, I knew I was seeing something I was never supposed to see. What I didn't know was that this secret went all the way to the top. And by noticing it, I had just painted a target on my own back. My chief of security would later tell me a version of the truth, but it was what he didn't say that made me fear for my life. My name is James, I'm 42 years old, and this is the story of how I uncovered a rot so deep, it threatened to bring the whole institution down with it. For 12 years, my world has been the slam of steel doors and the low, constant hum of tension. I'm a correctional officer at Blackwood Correctional Facility, a place most people only see in the movies. You get used to the rhythm of it all. The 6 a.m. count, breakfast, yard rotations, lock-in. The routine is the only thing that shields you from the chaos that's always just simmering under the surface. You learn to read the air, to notice the little shifts in pressure that tell you a storm's coming. It's a skill you pride yourself on. It's what keeps you alive. My life was that routine. Wake up, put on the uniform, drive to a place built to hold the worst of humanity, and try to keep a lid on it. I was good at my job. I wasn't some naive rookie. I knew things happened. Kites, secret notes, got passed, contraband showed up during shakedowns, gangs tested their boundaries. That was all part of the ecosystem. But I believed, for the most part, that the lines were clear. There were us, the officers, and them, the inmates. The good guys and the bad guys. It was a simple way of looking at the world, but you needed it to get through the day. Then came Emily. Her husband was an inmate named Michael. He wasn't a lifer or a gangbanger. Just some white-collar guy in for a complicated fraud charge I never bothered to learn the details of. He was quiet, kept to himself, and always looked lost, like a man who took a wrong turn and ended up in hell by mistake. Emily visited him like clockwork every week, a ghost in the crowded, echoing visitation hall. She was thin, pale, with eyes that darted around like she was expecting a blow from any direction. I'd always just chalked up her nervous energy to being in a place like Blackwood. The smell of industrial cleaner that can't quite mask the scent of sweat and despair, the noise, the sheer weight of all that concrete and steel, it gets to people. I was supervising the visitation room on a slow Tuesday afternoon. The room was only half full. I saw Emily come in, sign the log, and find a seat. But she didn't go to the table where Michael was waiting for her. Instead, she walked to a corner near the vending machines, where another officer was standing. Officer Davis. Mark Davis was a few years younger than me, a guy who always seemed a little too slick for the job. He had this swagger that didn't fit the uniform, and a grin that never quite reached his eyes. He wasn't even supposed to be in visitation that day. He was assigned to block duty. My internal alarm, the one I'd spent years honing, started to go off. Just a low hum at first, a quiet feeling that something was wrong. I watched them from my post across the room. I was too far to hear anything, but I didn't need to. I saw Emily's hands. They weren't just shaking a little, they were trembling violently, uncontrollably. She was clutching her purse so tight her knuckles were bone white. Davis leaned in close, his voice low and urgent. He did all the talking. Emily just stood there, frozen, nodding every so often. Her face was a mask of pure terror. Then I saw it. A thick, white envelope passed from her trembling hand to his. He didn't even look at it. He just slipped it into his inner pocket with a practiced smoothness that told me this wasn't the first time. He gave her a final, sharp nod, turned, and walked out through the staff-only door without a single look back. Emily just stood there for a full minute, her body still shaking. She looked over at her husband, Michael, who'd been watching the whole thing with a look of complete and utter defeat on his face. She finally walked over, sat down, and they spent the next hour in hushed, agonizing tones, never touching, barely making eye contact. The sight of her hands was burned into my mind. That wasn't just the fear of a civilian in a prison. That was the fear of a mouse cornered by a snake. And the snake was wearing my uniform. The clear line I'd always seen between good and bad had just been smeared into a sickening gray. I didn't know exactly what I'd just seen, but I knew it was a secret. And in a place like Blackwood, a secret is a dangerous thing. It's like a seed that, once planted, can grow into something monstrous. I had a choice. I could forget about it, go back to the safety of my routine, or I could pull on that thread. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that pulling that thread could unravel everything. For the next few days, I tried to forget it. I told myself it was none of my business. In a place like Blackwood, sticking your nose where it doesn't belong is a great way to get it broken. Or worse. You see what you're paid to see, you write your reports, you go home. That's the code. But I couldn't shake the image of Emily's trembling hands. It was a nagging whisper in the back of my head on every shift. So I started watching Davis. It wasn't hard. We all work in a fishbowl. I started noticing things I'd overlooked before. The new, expensive watch on his wrist. The way he casually mentioned buying a new car, something that should have been a major stretch on a CO's salary. He was jumpy, too. His usual slick demeanor was starting to crack. He'd flinch if a tray dropped or a door slammed too loud. He was a man carrying a heavy secret, and it was making him sloppy. I decided to approach him casually. During a shift change, I caught him by the lockers. "Hey, Mark. Saw you talking to inmate Michael's wife the other day. Everything all right?" His reaction was instant. His eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about? I don't know his wife." "You must be mistaken." The lie was so bad, so obvious, it was almost an insult. "I'm pretty sure it was you, man. Over by the vending machines." "You need to get your eyes checked, James," he snapped, his voice turning hard. "I was on my post. Now, if you'll excuse me." He pushed right past me and was gone. That denial was all the confirmation I needed. He was hiding something, and he was terrified that I'd seen it. The low hum of my internal alarm was now a persistent buzz. This was more than just some CO bending the rules. The fear in Emily's eyes, the thick envelope, Davis's new money and his paranoia, it all pointed to something deep and dirty. My next move was to look into the inmate, Michael. I used my clearance to pull his file. On the surface, nothing stood out. 7-year sentence for wire fraud and embezzlement. No history of violence, no gang ties, a model prisoner. But as I dug into the visitation logs and his call records, a pattern emerged. His wife, Emily, was his only visitor. His only approved phone contact. There was no mention of Officer Mark Davis anywhere. No reason for them to ever interact, let alone for Davis to be meeting with his wife. So why was Davis the one taking an envelope from her? The only logical answer was that this was all happening off the books. Harris's office was exactly what you'd expect, immaculate, orderly, and cold. He sat behind a huge mahogany desk, the wall behind him covered in awards. He looked up when I walked in, his eyes sharp, analytical. He didn't ask me to sit. "What is it, officer?" he asked, his voice flat. My own voice felt shaky as I started talking. I laid it all out, trying to sound as professional as I could. I told him about the meeting between Emily and Davis, the trembling, the envelope, the new watch, the car, and Davis's hostile denial. I expected him to be shocked, maybe even a little skeptical. He was neither. He just listened, his face a complete blank. When I finished, he was silent for a long, uncomfortable moment, his fingers steepled in front of him. "You did the right thing bringing this to me, James," he finally said, his voice low. He pointed to the chair in front of his desk. "Sit down." I sat, every muscle in my body tense. "What you saw," he began, leaning forward, "is part of a much larger, more sensitive operation. We've known about Officer Davis's side business for some time. A wave of relief washed over me, so strong it almost made me dizzy. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone in this. Davis is dirty, Harris continued, his voice dropping even lower. He's been smuggling contraband. But this isn't about cigarettes or cell phones. He's working for a major outside player, a crime boss named Anthony Gallo. The name hit me like a punch. Everyone knew Gallo. He was the head of a powerful crime syndicate with its hands in everything. Inmate Michael, the husband, Harris explained, wasn't just some random accountant. He was one of Gallo's top guys. He got caught, but he refused to flip. Gallo's terrified of what Michael knows, afraid he'll eventually cut a deal with the feds. So, he's been using Davis to control him from the inside. Suddenly, it was all starting to click into place. Emily's terror. The envelope. What's in them? I asked. Instructions. Threats. The money is just to keep Davis loyal. Gallo is blackmailing Emily by threatening her family on the outside. He's forcing her to be the go-between to make sure her husband stays silent. The fear you saw, James, it was real. She's trapped. He leaned back, watching me process it all. We've been building a case. A big one. Internal Affairs, the FBI. We're trying to take down not just Davis, but Gallo's whole operation. And that's why I need you to do something for me. Something very important. Anything, I said, a new sense of purpose surging through me. Nothing, he replied, his eyes locking on mine. You do absolutely nothing. You forget what you saw. You don't talk to Davis, you don't talk to Emily, you don't even look their way. You go back to your post and act like this conversation never happened. We are at a critical stage. Anything that spooks Davis or Gallo could blow this whole thing wide open and put people's lives at risk. Including yours. Do you understand? Yes, sir, I said, but a cold knot of unease was tightening in my stomach. It all sounded right, it all made sense, but something felt off. The story was too neat. Harris was an old cop, and he was handling me like an asset, not a fellow officer. He was telling me a story, and he needed me to believe it. I left his office and walked back to the cell blocks. The familiar sounds of the prison seemed different now, layered with this dangerous new knowledge. Harris had told me to stand down, that the big guns were handling it. But his warning felt less like protection and more like a leash. He'd revealed a conspiracy, but I had the chilling feeling he'd only shown me one layer of it. The rot went deeper. And his story, the one meant to put my mind at ease, had done the exact opposite. It made me feel like a pawn in a game where I didn't even know all the players. The web of deceit was far more complex than a simple dirty officer. I was on the edge of a conspiracy that involved the very man supposed to be upholding the law. If you think this is intense, make sure you subscribe, because it only gets crazier from here. You won't believe where this path leads. For a week, I did exactly what Harris ordered. I became a ghost. I walked my shifts with my eyes forward, ignoring Davis, ignoring the sad, defeated look on Michael's face, ignoring the memory of Emily's hands. I did my job. I tried to convince myself I'd done my part, that it was out of my hands now. But that knot of unease in my stomach only got tighter. Harris's story was too clean, like a perfect movie plot. The heroic chief, working with the FBI to take down the mob. But life inside Blackwood wasn't a movie. It was messy and complicated. Why tell me, a random CO, the specifics of a top-secret FBI investigation? Why drop a name like Anthony Gallo? It felt less like a briefing and more like a performance, a story designed to put me in a box and keep me quiet. The doubt ate at me. I started fixating on the details. The logistics company Michael worked for. I couldn't remember the name from his file. A small thing, but it bothered me. I decided to take a risk. Late one night, when the admin wing was dead quiet, I used a colleague's login, a guy who owed me a big one, to access the Inmate database from a remote terminal. I couldn't risk my own name getting flagged for looking at Michael's file again. I pulled up the case summary. Michael was convicted of embezzling $1.2 million from a company called North Star Logistics. I ran a quick search on my phone. North Star Logistics. It was widely known as a front for Anthony Gallo. So far, Harris's story held up. But then I dug deeper. In the fine print of the case file, buried in legalese, was a list of corporate entities involved in the prosecution. One name jumped out: Omnicorp. They were the parent company, the multinational conglomerate that had first flagged the financial problems at their subsidiary, North Star. Omnicorp was a corporate giant with a squeaky clean public image and a reputation for being absolutely ruthless. And they had a very public, very fierce rivalry with Gallo's businesses. Something clicked. This wasn't just a mob boss trying to keep an inmate quiet. This was corporate warfare. Michael wasn't just an accountant. He was the guy who knew where all the bodies were buried. The information he had wasn't just a threat to Gallo. It was a potential weapon for Omnicorp. The shape of the conspiracy was changing in my mind. It wasn't a straight line from Gallo to Davis to Michael. It was a triangle. Gallo on one point, Omnicorp on another, and Michael trapped in the middle. So where did Harris fit in? Was he really the noble warrior for justice, or was he playing for one of the teams? My paranoia was kicking into overdrive. I remembered a conversation from months ago in the staff canteen. Harris was talking to some guy in a suit I didn't recognize. They were talking about stocks and corporate takeovers. I'd tuned it out at the time, but now I had to wonder, was that man from Omnicorp? I needed proof. And I knew I wasn't going to find it inside Blackwood. I had to go outside. I called an old friend, Rick, a guy who washed out of the police academy and became a PI. He was cynical and always broke, but he was a genius at digging up dirt. We met at a dim bar an hour out of town. I laid out what I knew and what I suspected, keeping the names vague. A dirty CO, a terrified wife, a powerful chief, a mob front company, and a rival corporation. Rick just listened, sipping his beer. "James, you've kicked a hornet's nest," he said when I finished. "These aren't street thugs. This is organized crime and corporate espionage. They don't just break your legs, they erase you. Your job, your reputation, everything." "I know," I said. "But I can't let it go. Can you find out who Chief Harris is meeting with outside of work?" Rick sighed. "It'll be expensive. And dangerous. Tailing a guy like that. He's ex-state police. He'll know all the tricks." "I'll pay you," I said, pushing an envelope of cash, most of my savings, across the table. "Just be careful." While Rick started tailing Harris, I took another risk inside. I had to know what was being smuggled. It couldn't just be threats. The pressure on Michael was for something specific. Harris said it was about keeping him quiet, but what if it was the opposite? What if it was about making him talk? My chance came during a surprise shakedown of Michael's cell block. While the other officers were tossing bunks, I was methodical. I wasn't looking for a weapon or drugs. I was looking for information. And I found it, tucked into the spine of an old paperback. It wasn't a letter. It was pages filled with what looked like gibberish, long strings of numbers and letters. Code. And hidden with it was a tiny, folded piece of paper. On it were 2 words: the ledger. This was it. This was what everyone was after. Michael wasn't just an accountant. He was the keeper of a ledger detailing Gallo's entire criminal operation. It was the key to everything. And someone, Gallo, Omnicorp, Harris, was using Emily and Davis to squeeze Michael into giving it up. A week later, Rick called. His voice was tense. "You were right to be paranoid, James. Your chief isn't the hero he claims to be. He's had 3 off-the-books meetings in the last 2 weeks. Same person every time. A senior vice president from Omnicorp. The last piece slid into place, and the picture it made was terrifying. Harris wasn't working with the FBI to take down Gallo. He was working for Omnicorp to steal from Gallo. He was using his position as chief of security, using Davis as a disposable tool, and using a terrified family as pawns to extract Gallo's most valuable secret for a corporation. The internal investigation was a complete lie, a cover story to control me and to give him a fall guy, Davis, if things went sideways. He hadn't been trying to protect me. He'd been trying to neutralize me. He underestimated me. And now I knew the truth. I was standing in the middle of a war between 2 titans, with a corrupt chief of security playing both sides for his own gain. And I, a simple correctional officer, was the only one who knew the full picture. The target on my back was real, but the person aiming the rifle wasn't who I thought. It was the man at the very top of my own command chain. The realization that Harris was a player, not the referee, changed the game completely. The walls of Blackwood, once a symbol of authority, now felt like they were closing in on me. I was trapped inside with the monster, and he held all the keys. Every casual nod from another officer, every routine question from a superior, it all felt loaded. Was this guy loyal to Harris? Was I being watched? The paranoia was a physical weight. But underneath the fear, a cold resolve was hardening in my gut. This was more than just a dirty cop. This was a betrayal of the entire system. Harris was using the very institution of justice as his personal tool for corporate espionage. He was using the desperation of people like Emily and Michael as leverage for his own profit. It was a rot that went straight to the core. Then came the twist I never saw coming. It wasn't in a secret file or a hushed meeting. It was in a box of old photographs in my own attic. My mind was racing, trying to find a way to expose Harris without getting myself killed. I was thinking about Omnicorp, and a half-forgotten memory from my childhood bubbled to the surface. My father had owned a small, independent shipping company. He'd been driven out of business, bankrupted by a hostile takeover from some faceless corporation. He lost everything. The stress led to a heart attack that killed him. I was just a teenager, but I remembered the name on the legal papers, the name he used to curse under his breath, Omnicorp. I spent that night digging through old family records. And there it was, in black and white. The legal documents from a hostile takeover of my father's company. All orchestrated by Omnicorp. I had joined the correctional system with a vague, simmering desire for justice. I had even maneuvered my transfer to Blackwood a year ago, not by chance, but because I'd heard that a key financial player from Gallo's organization, a man whose dealings intersected with Omnicorp, had just been sent there. That man was Michael. The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. I hadn't just stumbled into this conspiracy. On some subconscious level, I had been looking for it. My entire career had been leading me to this exact moment. I wasn't just a CO caught in the crossfire. I was the son of a man destroyed by Omnicorp, and I had unknowingly placed myself in the one spot on Earth where I could get my revenge. This was no longer just about justice. It was personal. In that moment, everything became terrifyingly clear. The game had a new player, one that Harris and Omnicorp knew nothing about, me. And I had my own agenda. My plan began to form. Not one of violence, but of psychological warfare. I couldn't go to the FBI. Harris was their contact, and he would bury any report I made. The press was too risky. I had to make the conspiracy eat itself. I had to turn the players against each other. My first move was to contact Michael. I couldn't risk it directly. I used an old-school method, a trusted inmate, a lifer with nothing to lose and a deep-seated hatred for authority. I passed a kite to be delivered to Michael. The message was simple, designed to prove I was on his side. Harris is working for Omnicorp. He's not getting you out. He's selling the ledger. I can help. It was a huge gamble. He could have turned me in. But I was betting on his desperation. I was right. The next day, a message came back. One word. How? I had my ally. Phase 1 was to neutralize Officer Davis. I used my observations of his smuggling routes to make an anonymous tip to the state police, not internal affairs, detailing a specific time and place outside the prison where Davis was picking up a payment. I framed the tip to sound like it came from one of Gallo's rivals, so it couldn't be traced back inside. Davis was caught red-handed. Just like that, Harris's main tool was off the board. Harris would think Gallo's enemies got him, never suspecting it was me. With Davis gone, Harris was blind and would start to get sloppy. Phase 2 was the masterstroke. Through my inmate contact, I told Michael to prepare 2 copies of the ledger. Not the whole thing, but a significant chunk. One copy would detail Gallo's illegal finances. The other would be subtly altered. It would expose Gallo, but it would also contain expertly fabricated evidence implicating Harris, making it look like he was planning to double-cross Omnicorp and sell the ledger to a third party. My revenge wasn't going to be simple. I was going to hand each side the weapon to destroy the other. The stage was set. I felt a chilling sense of power. I was no longer just a guard. I was the architect of their downfall. The boy whose father was ruined by a corporation was about to bring that corporation to its knees, using the very corruption they were trying to exploit. The end came fast. Using 2 separate burner phones and encrypted emails set up by Rick, I executed the final phase. The first package, the real ledger excerpt, was leaked to a trusted investigative journalist known for taking on organized crime. I knew she would verify it and protect her source. When the story broke, it would unleash hell on Anthony Gallo. The second package, the altered ledger implicating Harris, was sent directly to the CEO of Omnicorp. The message was simple: your man in Blackwood is planning to betray you. Here's the proof. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Within 48 hours, the journalist's story went public. Armed with a ledger, the FBI launched a massive series of raids on Gallo's operations. His empire began to crumble. At the same time, Omnicorp acted with silent, corporate brutality. They didn't call the police. That would expose their own dirty work. Instead, they cut Harris loose. 2 days after the story broke, Chief Harris was reported missing. His car was found abandoned on a desolate highway. He was never seen again. Whether it was Omnicorp's private contractors or what was left of Gallo's crew, I'll never know. He was simply erased. In the chaos, federal investigators discovered Michael's role as the source. He and Emily were immediately taken into federal custody. For their cooperation, they were given new identities and placed in the Witness Protection Program, finally free. And me? I remained a ghost. In the storm of investigations and headlines, no one ever looked at the quiet correctional officer who just did his job. My revenge was complete. The corporation that destroyed my family was dragged into a scandal that cost them billions. The corrupt chief who used his badge as a weapon was gone. The family trapped in the middle was free. A month later, I stood in the yard at Blackwood. The air felt cleaner, but the victory felt hollow. To get justice, I had become a conspirator. I had lied and manipulated and orchestrated events that led to a man's disappearance and likely death. I had used the same ruthless methods as the men I wanted to destroy. As I think about it now, I realize that revenge is a double-edged sword. It brought a certain satisfaction, yes, but it left its own scars. I look at the uniform in my locker each day and wonder if I still have the right to wear it. I won the war, but I'm not sure I can call myself one of the good guys anymore. The line I once saw so clearly is now forever blurred. I live in the gray, in a place of shadows and echoes, forever changed by the secrets these walls hold. Justice was served, but the path to get there was dark and twisted. Did I go too far? Was it justified? Let me know what you think in the comments. This world is filled with stories where the lines get blurred and people are forced to make impossible choices. If this story left you thinking, hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe. You won't want to miss the dark truths we uncover next.